we have the stories to tell. I mean, that's what's so amazing about it. It is, people will come up and say, oh, congratulations on the success of the podcast. It's like, well, it's your podcast. I mean, it's your stories. You're the ones creating this content. And, whether it's the volunteers or, the staff for AFP Libre or CBA. So it's been great. But what did you think going into that first meeting? Were you kind of skeptical?
So I had this laundry list of things that I wanted to get done. And Jeff Crank gives me a call and says, hey, what about a podcast? Can we add a podcast to that list? We spent a lot of time just figuring out how we'd actually put the team together to produce a podcast.
Yeah, too much time. You drove me crazy, actually.
Well, again, we needed to have a good plan because if you didn't have a good plan, no way we could have made 130 episodes in a year. We have an organization that we work at that has just a treasure trove of amazing individuals and amazing, compelling stories. And that's why this idea was so good, because we have the goods to be able to tell people some very inspirational content.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another episode of American Potential. This will be our last episode of 2023, and it only seemed fitting that we'd invite the entire podcast team on to talk about the stories we've been able to share with you, and also what it's like working on the podcast, especially having to deal with me. We're going to get into that. Intervention time. This episode will also wrap up our 4-part End of the Year series. And if you've missed the other 3 episodes in the series, we talked with Russ Durstein from Concerned Veterans for America, Jose Malia from Libre, and Kent Strang from Americans for Prosperity to talk about what their organizations have been able to do this past year. So I'd now like to introduce the podcast team. And if you can believe it, this is the first time we've all been in the same room together. That's what an effort across this country, this podcast actually is. And this is an amazing opportunity for all of us to be together. First, let's introduce Daniel Bassali, who is the Managing Brand Director for Americans for Prosperity, John Quick, who does the social media and marketing for the podcast, Monica Haas, who's the content manager, and finally, Matt West, who, if it wasn't for him, no one would be able to see or hear the podcast. He's our board operator, and he does all of the production post the recording ourselves. Okay, everybody is from a different part of the country. Welcome, everybody. It's great to have everybody here.
Hey, Jeff, good to be here.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
So, first of all, thanks to everybody here who does such a great work on the podcast. And I know I've had a blast. I mean, I've had a blast from we launched February 1st. Was that, Daniel?
That sounds about right.
Is that the first time?
February, yep.
So I've had an absolute blast doing it. We have done, I was looking through, what are we, 130 episodes, somewhere around there right now, right?
Pretty close.
And it's just been, it's been incredible. So we're from different parts of the country. And I guess I'd love to know what you think as you contribute to the podcast. What do you bring from your state? Like, we know you bring bad internet from Alaska.
no
John,
cell phone service.
No cell phone service. We called John Nikiski John because John is from Nikiski, Alaska, right? Nobody's ever heard of it except for John.
We like it that way.
We like it that way, he says, right? So it is interesting that a guy from Alaska is like our social media guy, right?
Yep.
Tell us about you, John.
Well, my family and I, we live in Nikiski, Alaska. Wonderful wife, 3 kids. We live down a dirt road that you'd literally never go to unless you live there or work there. Nikiski's at the end of a road. And so we love it there. When I left to come to DC for this trip, we left, 3 feet of snow. Takes you 5 hours to get to the airport. You see a couple wrecks on the way. It's just it's an experience. It takes about 24 hours to get from Alaska to the East Coast. So,
and John, I give you credit. I think everybody gives you credit because you deserve the credit. You actually came up with the idea of the podcast, right? So we've talked about this before, but you were working for Americans for Prosperity, and you actually said to me, why do we not do a podcast? Like, I'd been doing a radio for like 14 years or something at the time. And I said, well, that's a great idea. Why don't you put a plan together? And so you did. and we took that to the CEO, to Emily Seidel. And Emily's like, this is awesome. I love it. But I got to have you go talk to this guy named Daniel. We'd never met Daniel before. And remember, we were very leery.
He's the checks and balances of this.
John and I had this like call beforehand, like, okay, what are we going to do with this Daniel guy? Like, we got to go into this knowing. How did you come into that meeting, Daniel? Like, when you came into it, were you like, these crackpots have this idea or what?
Well, we get a lot of ideas. And so, yeah, maybe a little bit. I'm also, you were asking, where do we come from?
Yeah.
What do we bring into it? I live in Washington, D.C.
Right.
I'm from Fairfax, Virginia originally. So I've been in and around D.C. almost all my entire life. Very few of us who are actually that way. So I think what I bring is some cynicism and deep skepticism. And so when
you're the Darth Vader
I'm
of the podcast.
Darth Vader of the
I mean, let's be honest.
100%.
Yeah.
So when we crack the top 5%, I ask why we're not in the top 4%. So that's the running joke here.
Yeah.
But high standards. We have high standards where we work. Everyone holds us to that. And so the number one thing was like, how are we going to execute this in a way that's going to be really strong and really compelling? And thankfully, we have an organization that we work at that has just a treasure trove of amazing individuals and amazing, compelling stories. And that's why this idea was so good, because we have the goods to be able to tell people some very inspirational content.
Yeah. We have the stories to tell. I mean, that's what's so amazing about it. It is, people will come up and say, oh, congratulations on the success of the podcast. It's like, well, it's your podcast. I mean, it's your stories. You're the ones creating this content. And, whether it's the volunteers or, the staff for AFP Libre or CVA. So it's been great. But what did you think going into that first meeting? Were you kind of skeptical or
Sure.
Were you?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll say
we'd never met. You had kind of just started not long before that with Americans for Prosperity, right?
That's right. And so I had this laundry list of things that I wanted to get done. And Jeff Crank gives me a call and says, hey, what about a podcast? Can we add a podcast to that list? And I'm like, maybe a good idea. I don't know how we'd go about it. If you remember, we spent a lot of time just figuring out how we'd actually put the team together to produce a podcast.
Too much time. You drove me crazy, actually.
Well, again, we needed to have a good plan, because if you didn't have a good plan, no way we could have made 130 episodes in a year.
Well, and look, I give you the credit for that, because you kind of pulled back on the reins a few times, right? Because if it would have been like John and I, we'd be like a couple of cowboys, like, okay, we got a microphone, recording it on our iPhones. Yeah, exactly. So, that's what you brought to the process, was like the discipline, like the logo. I love the logo. The logo's awesome, but we probably wouldn't have thought that through, right? And had all that stuff and the branding and, AmericanPotential.com and all that. So you brought all of that really to the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, the biggest thing is just shaping this thing as a project to tell stories. Yeah. That was the most important piece of this formula, to make it work, make it compelling, and in my interest, be able to showcase all the amazing people, the amazing victories this organization has had, and really inspire other Americans to know that even in this dysfunctional political system, that there's still a way to make an impact.
So I got him held captive. So the rest of the staff knows what I'm going to do here. So how are we doing on that, Daniel? Are we doing okay? Are we telling good stories? I mean, because you mentioned being kind of the cynic a little bit.
You want me to compliment you now, Jeff?
Well, I'm searching. Yeah. That's what I'm doing. No. I mean, how are we doing as a team? And it's not me doing this. I mean, this is an amazing team.
100%.
And, I always try to give credit, because credit is due there, right, to this whole team. But
yeah, I mean, like, if I can, I guess I'm going to give us a grade report. Here we go. Jeff, you're doing all right. Now.
It was so great having you, Daniel. Which of these buttons do I push to cut his mic? The big one, the big red one?
No, okay. but honestly, it's a pleasure to work with y'all. Like, John is constantly pushing the edge on the latest technology, the latest marketing tactics, figuring out different ways we can cut these episodes, produce things on YouTube, on Shorts. I didn't know what Shorts was, and I used to do digital marketing. Finding really unique tools for us to reach new audiences, to shape new content. It's been incredible to just watch you go, and you've just got this motor behind you to do all of that, and that's been just a pleasure to watch. And then Monica is the engine of this team. Like, I mean, She wears probably like 6 or 7 different hats here. I mean, she looks out for the stories themselves, brings them to us. We just riff and raff on our meetings, and she keeps us organized. She's like, okay, but can we get through this list, please? And not only that, but like she has a true eye for these stories. I mean, like she digs in deep to understand the individuals, whether they'd be a good fit for this podcast. And then she cares about the individuals. She feels passionate when she's pitching the story ideas to us. I mean, she's basically writing the whole episode for us right there and then. And then afterwards, she's taking it, turning it into some questions, and basically doing your job completely for you. The only thing you're doing is just showing up here in this studio. So I just can't say enough about how much work Monica puts in, not to mention all the scheduling, not to mention all the coordinating with the guests. And if we have a lot of VIPs, we're going to talk about it, I'm sure, but a lot of very important people have come on to this podcast and talked about serious issues. And Monica's had to coordinate with their teams, which I'm sure has not been easy, but she makes it all seem seamless.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, that's a great point. I noticed you really didn't compliment me. You mostly just took shots at me, but that's okay. I'll remember that post-edit stuff. Anyway, and let's get to Monica, because Monica had to set up the entire process for us to go about getting guests. And like, there's legal approval. There's all these things that people who listen to the podcast probably don't think we'd even have to set up, but you had to set up all those processes from beginning to end. You have a background in journalism, I guess, right? And in being a producer, you worked in the TV production.
So I worked 17 years in local news.
Right.
Worked on the production side. So if you ever see the control room, I was the one sitting behind the board, hitting all the buttons. So then I switched to a lifestyle show. And so that's where I really got to start telling stories of creators. And so where I was coming from, we called them makers. So they would make, jewelry or trying to think what else, like ceramics or something. So I wanted to highlight the small businesses and what they were passionate about, because it was just one person doing it. So that's where the storytelling kind of came in. And that's what I was doing for the last about 3 years in that before coming to AFP.
And you were working for AFP as an engagement director and kind of doing that. And then this opportunity came up, and we sort of created the position, not knowing, how to really do it, but you kind of had to define it as you went along. But as I said, kind of built the systems as we were going, built the plane as we were flying it, as people say. But you have a passion for it and a love for it, and everybody can see that. And you make it to where I can literally sit down and, I've got an episode brief, we call them, and I get those on a Sunday. I get them on a Friday to a Sunday. I look at them Sunday evening, and I'm ready to go in on Mondays and record those. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing process and team that's been set up. So that's awesome. And then none of it, as I said, would even go on air if we didn't have Matt West. Now, Matt worked with me for many years on my radio show when I had a talk radio show. He lives in Colorado Springs, where I live, and Matt works with Salem Communications, and we actually go into a Salem studio, and that's where we are right now. We're in the Arlington, Virginia Salem studio now, but normally we record in Colorado Springs, and Matt West is the board operator. We started this podcast as an audio podcast, and then all of a sudden, I don't know, who came up with the idea of doing video? Was it you, John? Every good idea comes from John, doesn't it? It seems like it.
Certainly not you, Jeff.
Yeah. Oh, Daniel, I'm telling you,
zingers.
It's just amazing. It's funny how this was the only episode he was ever on. I love that. Anyway, I think John came up with the idea of, well, why don't we just do video? And we just happened to have Matt West, who has all the video equipment. I told him today, looking at this camera, I said, man, that must be a $4,000 camera. He goes, try $12,000 camera. Who spends their money on that? Matt West does. Matt, can you step in so people can at least see Matt West?
Yeah, there we go. See, I'm pushing John over here. There we go.
Get him out of the way. He never has a good idea.
We'll fix him in the edit, too. We'll just kind of push him out there.
That's right. Yeah, shove him through Daniel, if you will.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I just push colorful buttons on the board, and somehow we get a show, and The one thing is, the value I think I bring to this is the fact that every time you record, you have to see me in person. Regrettably, honestly. I don't know if that's much value, but there you go.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and then you take all of this and you edit it. First, you were editing the sound, getting it to John, and then you started editing the video and getting that all edited. And that's a full-time gig, really. For you.
It's busy.
It's pretty amazing.
It's busy, and it's cool because I've been working in radio for a while, but I do the video on the side. I've had a side business doing video for a while for different folks in Colorado Springs. So it was just kind of a natural progression to do radio and video with it, audio and video. Yeah. So I think it was just a blessing to be in the right place at the right time and know at least which of the red buttons I shouldn't press.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I mean, you have a passion for it. You love doing this. I mean, you really love the podcast. You agree with it sort of ideologically. But also, I think you just have a passion for putting out a really neat, good product, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I love what the podcast has done, and I love how it's been able to connect these stories. We have so many cool stories, and I get to see them in the edit before they go over the air. And I look at some of these, and I know when I'm editing them that, like, wow, this is really cool, or this is an amazing thing that this person in this episode has done. And we just keep seeing that, and we're 150 episodes in?
130.
130.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, seeing that 130 times now with the show is just so cool. And yeah, I like putting a quality product together, but I think it's the fundamental root of that really gets me excited.
How long does it take you to do one episode? Like, let's say to edit an episode.
Ooh, it's tough because some episodes require more than others. Now, we don't do much editing content-wise. We kind of let that flow and be as it is. But there's several hours that go into processing the footage, bringing the footage into the edit, doing the edit itself, doing graphics, and then bouncing it to a render server where it sits there and renders for several more hours. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it might be 5 or 6 hours for a single episode that you've seen.
30-minute episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then there's the audio side of it, too, the video, there's the shorts, and all of the above.
Yeah. Well, and Mr. Positive over here, Daniel, He was. I think you were worried when we even suggested doing the video, right?
Oh, you're gonna put me on the spot.
Well, you were.
Okay.
You were worried about it, but he does them incredible. I mean, so many times Daniel's come to me and said, Matt does amazing, like just really amazing work.
That's true. Absolutely.
So wait a minute. You've complimented everyone but me, so you might as well do Matt too.
I'm just getting lucky with it. No. I'm just getting lucky. I've got everyone fooled here. Yeah.
I actually want to ask Matt a question. Yeah. So I'm not even going to do your job there too.
Take the job over. Go ahead. What am I here for?
But Matt, can you, you've turned these around pretty quickly sometimes. We have some very, very topical episodes where we're bringing on a guest right before a big event. What's been, I think, the fastest turnaround that you've had to pull off for one of these episodes?
I think it was probably the Mike Pence episode.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to say it was the Mike Pence episode, which was really fun, by the way. I really enjoyed doing that. For me, at least, coming from Colorado, I'm not used to seeing presidential candidates very often, right? Or no less a former vice president, too. That one, we finished that edit as soon as, or that recording, and as soon as we finished that, I was working on the edit, went up to the hotel room, plugged that thing, put it together, and it was ready to go, basically the same day.
Wow.
I want to say, if I recall correctly, it was ready to go pretty quick.
And doing that out of your element, too, because you're not doing it out of the Colorado Springs studio. You're doing that on the fly. Where was it? It was in
Atlanta.
Yeah.
Well, what was funny about that, too, was that one of the recordings we had, I don't think it was right after Mike Pence, but and Monica, you may remember this, but we had Vivek Ramaswamy come through basically our recording studio we had set up at the Atlanta convention that we were at. And he wasn't on our show, but they asked us, hey, can we use this real quick for a press conference? Because you're kind of in the back. The door here kind of goes around away from the crowd so we can get him in. And we're like, yeah, sure, he can do that. So I'm sitting there editing after we finished a recording, and just he just comes across with his whole media entourage and does a press briefing right there. And 20 or 30 people pile all around, and they got microphones and cameras in his face. And I'm just sitting there editing. I'm like, oh, I guess this is my office now. So that was, speaking of editing on the road, that was you don't normally deal with that when you're in your own editing suite, right? If you're in the studio, you don't have a presidential candidate be like, hey, can I just do a press conference right here?
Yeah.
So that was really cool. Really cool.
Weren't you trying to eat at the same time?
Oh yeah. I was trying to eat, and I'm eating on the fly when I'm trying to edit and get stuff.
And poor
done.
Matt hasn't, like, what time is it now? We're recording this at 4:00 in the afternoon, and Matt hasn't had any lunch yet. So
Why don't you let him eat?
Well, we don't let him eat. You won't give me any money to pay him to eat, remember?
Keep the slim figure.
We had to keep the budget really low.
We can afford lunches for Matt.
Okay.
Jeff.
From now on,
about
we'll
that
do it.
after the episode.
From now on, we'll do it, but until now, it's been Daniel's fault. So anyway.
Roger
thank you,
that.
Matt. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Okay, let's get into some of the episodes. I want to talk about some of the episodes, what your favorites were. You guys have all been trying to steal my notes because I actually printed out notes and noted some of my favorites. So you guys want to take it so I don't have my favorites and you can look through it? Forget it. Do your own work on this. Okay, so I was looking through this, and first of all, incredible number of stories that we've told. And it's really hard to say, this is my favorite, but I will throw some that I really love. The William Burt episode, which was you noted it's the longest one. It was like 50 some minutes. 56 minutes. And if we don't hurry, this may exceed that. But anyway, William Burt, the barber in Iowa, one of my favorites. The Utah school, Dallin Richardson, the young man who was bullied and left. I love that story. That was an incredible story about education savings accounts. Othel Brand, the story at the U.S.-Mexico border. That was just an incredible story and podcast, I thought. Obviously, Cesar Grajales and the award-winning one that he still doesn't seem to care about. Anyway.
I care about you, Cesar.
He cares about Cesar. It's just not the award that he cares about. Anyway, Chief Clem, that was a very good episode. I actually recorded that one while I was in Alaska. And it's always kind of weird to me, like I record one in Alaska and somebody else is in Florida, and through the magic of Matt, it all comes through. I'm just gonna keep naming some, and then I want you some. Hey, I got my list. If you didn't show up with the list, that's your problem. Alan Roach, I love the Alan Roach one. That's your favorite.
One of my favorites.
The voice of the podcast, Alan Roach. Ambassador Nikki Haley. That's your favorite, right?
It's one of my favorites for sure.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're not talking about you right now. We'll get to you in a second. Okay. Let me go through these. Yeah, it was. Make a mental note. Coach Joe Kennedy. I love that episode. Jaden and
That's a good one.
Eden Rodriguez, the young man who with the backpack. Guy Benson, Mary Catherine Ham, and one more that I would point out, Greg Lukianoff. I love that one too. I thought that one was great. Okay, I want to get to yours, and then I have some stats of how many different classes of people we've had on. What's your favorite episode, Daniel?
Okay. I was thinking about this before before we started recording, and I have to say I think it's the 100th episode with Emily Seidel. And selfishly, here's why. I get the privilege of working with Emily.
You're sucking up. This is crazy. I mean, this is great. Emily's listening to this. This is sad.
Because it's Christmas time, we're doing all these holiday parties and everything.
Yeah.
And so there's always these icebreakers for the whole team. And like one's like, what's your favorite Christmas movie? And everyone goes and says one. Right now, Jeff just went and he just took them all. He just said all of them. And
I have the list.
And he's like, now it's your turn.
I'm Santa. I have the list.
Well, I'm going to say one that you haven't said yet,
okay.
Even though I got to say the William Burt one. I got to meet William Burt.
Yeah.
We went and shot some videos with him out in Waterloo, Iowa. Incredible what he means to his community there. There's a bunch of others that you said that are great, no doubt. But like, here's why the Emily Seidel one mattered a lot to me. I get to work with Emily quite a bit. I look up to Emily, obviously. She's the leader of our organization. But until this episode, I hadn't quite fully heard her story.
Sure.
Her pathway to getting to Americans for Prosperity, and even hearing why she thinks we're the most effective organization in the country to impact policy and improve people's lives. So for me to kind of hear her thought process when she made that decision, how she ended up at our organization was really, really interesting, because after 2 years of working here, I hadn't quite heard that before.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And the other thing that came through in that episode, and this is in all seriousness, is Emily's very humble. Mm-hmm. She's a very humble leader and a good leader. And that kind of came through. That comes through in a podcast if you've got that quality and that trait. And so I think that was great. And how many people have watched that. That's the most watched episode we've had.
Just about 1 million people.
Wow.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Okay, and then you said you had another one. Did you have another one besides William Burt? You said one I didn't mention. You were going to mention
that was the Emily Seidel one, but I'll mention that I also thought it was pretty just neat to have Grover Norquist on the show as well.
He was great.
Like, he's just such a iconic leader in public policy and protecting our wallets and our taxpayer money, making sure that it's only going to the most key areas where government should be focused on. So to have him on the show was pretty neat, and he always brings in just a ton of depth and a ton of intelligence to anything that he does, and so it was cool to hear him bring that, because we don't get it from you very much.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah. People ask me all the time, "Oh, Jeff," somebody said the other day, "Oh, you do a great job on that because you have a way of breaking it down for people." I'm like, yeah, because I'm dumb. I mean, that's what you're saying. I'm not smart enough to figure it out. And I own that. I own it for sure. Monica, how about you? What's your favorite podcast episodes?
So I feel kind of guilty just because I get to talk to all these people ahead of time.
Right.
So I get to have longer conversations. Most conversations I book them for 30 minutes, but most of them usually go an hour. Longest was 2.5 hours. So being able to actually talk to these guests and hear their stories has been great. Joel from Texas.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He sold his house to open a school for underprivileged kids because he was working in the public schools and he saw these kids struggling. And so he said God laid it on his heart to do this, and he's doing it debt-free. So Joel was a good one. I'm trying to feel so bad because now I have talked to all these people and I feel bad.
Do I have to turn my notes over? So
I almost said I need to see your notes.
Okay.
I think Matt from Texas again. He was the ranch manager, talking to him and him telling stories about what they were seeing with the immigrants coming across and, how it's changed over the years and the stories that he's heard. I thought that was another interesting one to hear. And I really do feel bad because I'm blanking on the 130
I'll give you my
episodes that
notes.
we've done.
I will give you my notes in just a second. Okay. And those are great. I will turn over my notes, but I got this one page here I got to see. John, what do you think, buddy?
Okay, so I think my favorite is Senator Dan Sullivan. He's a senator from Alaska.
I think he represents Nikiski.
Yeah, he
as
does.
I understand
and
it.
I think he's the first one to cuss on the episode.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
Yeah, but we had to...
I bleeped him.
You had to bleep a U.S. senator.
I was against that decision.
You didn't want it bleeped?
No.
Matt just bleeped him without asking.
All about authenticity, but I heard there was something like, was that an FEC thing so that we didn't get some sort of...
Probably.
Look, I don't want the FCC lawyers coming around. They're not friendly.
What
They're
was
not as friendly as Herb, by the way.
Well, let me ask you this, without saying the word. What was the word? Was it the S word? I can't remember.
I think it was the F word.
Was it? No, it wasn't.
No, I think it was the S word. I think
It was the S word. Okay, it was the S word.
If I say it right now, are you going to bleep?
We will bleep you, Daniel.
My
Yeah.
word.
In fact, if you were to say it right now, we'd remove you entirely from the podcast.
I think that's what you want.
That's good. Okay, Dan Sullivan.
He's just a great guy. But I think my other answer is maybe a little different. I get to see the people interact with the podcast on the social media side. And so that's been, I think, the most fun thing for me to see is that, from when we launched till now, we've had 10 million episode views and downloads, which is just ginormous. And that hundreds of thousands of people have commented. Probably 100,000 people have shared our episode just on Facebook. Tons of people are inspired every single day by folks and their stories. And I think that is the big win for me, is just seeing people realize that they too can make an impact, that they can be a stay-at-home dad or a soccer mom, have an idea and make an impact without having to be an elected official of any kind. And so I get to see that in the comments. Seeing people inspired and propelled to go do something, I think is very motivational. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And that's what's so great about the podcast is we're just telling the story of everyday citizens who stepped up. Yeah. Matt, how about you? Do you have any? What was your favorite episode?
Yeah, it's tough to name a favorite, right? And I also feel like the ones I don't name, they're going to come after me with like pitchforks. But You mentioned Alan Roach initially. That one was really cool because he's kind of like a radio like hero.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he's a legend in radio, in sports, and all of that. But there's some other ones that I thought were really cool, namely the ones where we've had a guest who's from another country and they come on and talk about why they came to America.
Yeah, those
are I mean, there's too many to name off right here, but even some I can think of. Sarah Hatemi, who we had on recently, she had a great story with the sandwich shop. I loved that story.
Isn't that a great story?
And Amy Wu, I want to say, with her story too. Lily Wu. Sorry,
yeah.
Lily Wu.
Yeah.
She'll come with the pitchfork, by the way. But Lily Wu. And that was really cool because, you know, she went from watching, you know, people on television and trying to learn English from that to wanting to be on TV herself as a reporter, as a journalist.
Right.
And so, like, those stories are really cool. If I had to pick one that was just cool, I think Glenn Jacobs was cool. Because Mayor Glenn Jacobs, because the whole time I was doing the edit, I was watching highlights of his time in the WWE as a wrestler, and it was like awesome. And I was kind of disappointed I couldn't have like a, you know, cool intro for him, you know. And but that was really neat.
Yeah.
The whole time I was editing that, I was watching him like body slam guys off of, you know, tables and things like that. So you know, that was fun. That was cool.
So we all have our own episodes for different reasons, and that's amazing. And Alan Roach, I mean, you mentioned Alan. I know I was pretty insistent on wanting Alan Roach's voice, and I look back on that decision and I love it because every time I hear the podcast, I listen to that intro and it's world class, right? Because it's got that voice. I could never do that voice. None of us in this room could do. You could come close, Matt, with your radio voice. But Alan Roach's voice is just like, this is American potential. I mean, it's just so amazing. It's just iconic. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I wrote these stats down, and now you can have my notes after I tell you this. We have had on this show, what have we been, 10 months, 11 months, 10 and a half months? We've been doing the show, right? 7 United States senators on this show.
Bad.
Pretty awesome.
1 governor. You all thinking, really? We've had a governor?
Soon to be 2.
No, it'll be just 1.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah. Okay.
That one. Okay. It's a coming episode. 1 lieutenant governor, right? The lieutenant governor of Virginia. 7 members of Congress, 7 U.S. House members, and 2 presidential candidates. That's pretty spectacular. How many other podcasts could say? There's not many other podcasts that could say they've done that. That has to impress you, Daniel.
Sure, fine.
Okay.
For the record, we have Daniel on the show too. You got to.
Oh, yeah. Let me write that down. And 1 Daniel. Yeah, 1 Daniel. Yeah. Anyway.
A story on that, like, because we had Senator Ted Budd very early.
Show. Yeah.
And so I was like, are we, like, again, me playing my role, are we sure we're ready to do it?
Yeah, right.
I mean, we barely have gotten the mechanics of producing a single episode. I think he was the 3rd episode. So I just remember, like, me personally, like, sweating out all the questions. Monica knows how to do her job, but I'm like, hey, have we made sure, like, has the scheduler, like, confirmed the time? Do they know how to get on the show? So to hear how many we've been through and how easy and quick we're getting these done compared to where we were at in the very, very beginning stages, like, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah. It's been amazing. And again, it speaks to the process that you put in place. But yeah, going through that, I mean, 7 U.S. senators, it's incredible. So, and we've come a long way. Ted Budd, that was all audio. We didn't have any video at that time. And then, you know, we jumped into it. Okay, here's my notes. Now you can take a look at them. Tell me if you know, just take a minute, see if there's anything in there. You look at it, you go, oh yeah, I just really do. I love that episode or whatever. But some great ones, and you know, more to come. That's what's so exciting. Let's talk about the future just a little bit. 2024, we're, I think, on the verge of signing some really cool agreements with the podcasts that are going to bring more of that. We've launched Potencial Americano, which is the Spanish version. I just talked with Jose Malia, and he's really excited about that and what we're doing there. But John keeps coming up with these crazy ideas. He's like, well, I want to go do the podcast live. I want to do live events. Matt wants to go do live podcast episodes. We've talked about doing town hall meetings for AFP with a U.S. senator or a congressman and have it broadcast as a podcast episode as well. Those are amazing ideas. And to me, that's what's been so fun about this podcast is the experimentation we've been able to do. And I think it speaks volumes to our organization to allow us to do that. And I think we've proven ourselves a little bit here too. So maybe they'll give us even more leash, Daniel, to go out and do some other things. But I mean, that's really fun to be able to go out and innovate and do that. And I know you've enjoyed that aspect of it as well as others. John, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it speaks volumes for Americans for Prosperity to do something new. It's one thing to say you want to be like entrepreneurs or you want to be innovative. Those are very easy things for a company that has this many employees to just say and do a rah-rah thing, and then everybody goes their separate ways. It's another thing to actually do it. And so I think it was very exciting for me to see that Emily, the CEO of Americans for Prosperity, was excited about this new idea. Not only was she excited about it, but they put, talent behind it. They threw Daniel our way and stuff like that. And I think that this just goes to show that, there's still some tricks that maybe are let to be played yet here with with American Potential, because there's so many opportunities for us to do innovative things that I think, 2024 is going to be exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Your thoughts on that innovation?
Yeah. I mean, like I said in the beginning, I think that John has really led that for us. And one thing that I think we might see in 2024 as well is some more experimentation around the content itself, the way we structure the content, maybe some new kinds of segments, new games we might be able to throw in there for our audience to learn more about some of the guests that we bring on, some of the hot topics of the day. So when we say we're just scratching the surface, I truly believe that there's so much more that we can do and ways we can educate people and inspire people. So I can't wait to see what else we come up with.
Yeah. Monica, any thoughts on that, on innovation in 2024 and what's ahead?
Well, it sounds like we're traveling a whole lot more for next year. That's what I heard.
Be. Yeah.
So, but no, I mean, we've done on the road a few times this year, which I like. But yeah, I'm excited to see what we can do. Yeah,
that's right. Now, Daniel was sucking up to Emily by saying those nice things about the episode and how great it was and all of that. Now, I just speak the truth. But I will say this. I think to your point with regard to Emily, there's not a lot of leaders that would have the courage to say, yeah, that's a good idea. Go out and do it and try it and innovate. And, I give you great credit, John, for coming up with the idea and for bringing it forward, because a lot of people just sit on an idea like that. Well, it'd be nice to do, but that seems like a lot of work. You didn't do that. You brought it forward to me, right? And then you built the document. We took it to Emily, but she had the courage too to say, hey, let's go out and try this. Let's try something new. And, it paid off. Not all the time. It's not always going to pay off when you try and do that, but leaders will lead and do that. And I give Emily great credit. And I think it is, we talk about culture a lot within AFP and with Stand Together, but I think that really speaks to it, like being able to go out and try new things and take a little bit of risk and do that. So anyway, all right, final thoughts before we wrap this up, because this will literally be the longest episode we've ever done if we don't wrap up in 22 seconds. Go. No, I'm kidding.
All right, Jeff, here we go.
All right.
Despite all the credit that's been shared all around, you're the face of this thing, and you're not just the face of it and the voice of it, but you've also been our team's leader. You deal with me being a prickly pear sometimes. You also though, have never heard an idea where you just shut it down. You roll with it. You explore it. You toss it to other people. You see what they think. You collaborate in a way that makes people feel very involved in it. And to get this many people to come onto a show, they have to feel safe. They have to feel respected. They have to feel like they've got an interest in it as well. And so you've been the leader who's really communicated that to our organization and outside guests as well. And so I'm going to finish by saying thank you for your leadership on this project. It's been a lot of fun. This group always has a good time on our Monday afternoon calls, and can't wait to see what comes next.
Because of those nice words, let's book him for a full 1 hour episode.
Let's go.
An hour?
Can we do that?
You want to do an hour?
Full hour with Daniel if he's going to say nice things like that. Yeah. Monica, any final thoughts?
No, I will say, so when I'm interviewing people I'm very kind of facts finding.
Yep.
And so what I love is like when I'm talking to people, I don't want to say it's dry, but it very is like facts finding. But when I'm getting those, I can actually see you turning the episode into what it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I enjoy that.
Yeah.
For sure.
What did you say one day? You said you can bake the cake, but
I bake the cake, you decorate it.
yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty interesting way to put it. I mean, for me, it's like I just do the easy part. I always think of that. Like I just sit down and read the notes and do the show. You all do the really hard part of the show. So John, any final thoughts?
It's just good to be a part of this team. And I think, for folks listening in, you make a difference. Folks in your communities, we do these stories to, provide inspiration. And everyday folks make a huge impact in their community. And so for folks listening, just know that you can make a difference and you do make a difference.
Yeah. Well, listen, awesome to have everybody in the room together. It's just been a great year working together with each of you. So thanks for all that you do for the podcast.
Thanks for having us on.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
It was fun. All right. Well, listen, I'm blessed. I mean, this was such a great idea when John came up with it, and to see it come to fruition and to grow as it has. I mean, I'm just honored and blessed to be a part of it. I've worked for Americans for Prosperity for 14 years, and it's still a thrill to be a part of the fight, to be able to fight for liberty and for freedom and to tell these stories. And I just really feel blessed and honored to be a part of this team, and whether it's it's all of them and all the great work that they do, but it's you too. And I just really want to thank you. None of this would be possible if you didn't listen to the podcast, watch it on YouTube, and really be a part of this, because I can tell you we've been successful, but we've only been successful because you actually find the content enjoyable and hopefully entertaining. And so thanks for all that you do to help make us successful. I wish you the best in 2024. Thank you for joining us and being part of the American Potential family.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.